Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whichever part of the world you are in. This is Rajiv Kulkarni, your host, and welcome to the Friday Global Electronics talk show about electronics manufacturing. Today, we have a very important and special topic, which is extremely important in the electronics manufacturing. We talk about counterfeit components, or the topic itself is reliability and counterfeit mitigation, SME. To talk about that and to discuss in our talk show today, we have a special guest. I will talk about him. I will give a brief intro about him in a couple of minutes. But before that, I would like to thank you all, the audience who watch the show, who encourages the channel by subscribing and sharing the channel with your friends and colleagues in the electronics industry. I thank you very much for that. And please continue to do so that some engineers can get benefit out of it. And this is purely a knowledge sharing platform that started very recently, and it's been not even 2 months. And we have been having a pretty interesting guest from India, from the US so far, and we will continue to have more and more interesting guests as you see and as you have been watching our show on a regular basis. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Sandeep Sadanandappa, who sits in Bangalore and who is a great technical backup for me. He has his own small company, A&V Perspective, where he does the audio visual support for the event, not only online, but also on-site events or huge events that he manages. Thank you very much for that, Sandeep. Let's get on to the business today. And as I said, today's topic is reliability and counterfeit mitigation, SMV. And we have a special guest. I'll just mention few lines about him. He is a co-founder and chief revenue officer at chipsID, advisors on product market fit and go-to-market strategy, draft strategic partnership agreements, co-authors counterfeit guides, and manages contract pricing for defense contractors. He has aerospace and medtech experience from supporting manufacturing in OEM and contract manufacturing roles, and he is a G19 committee member. We'll talk about what is G19 a little later. And he has GIDEP Representative, IEEE-published author, frequent SMTA Contributor, SMTA Surface Mount Technology Association Contributor, and holds a Bachelor's Degree from Bemidji State University. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Adam Hook, who is a co-founder and revenue officer at chipsID. Adam, welcome to the show. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's yeah, I'm in Minnesota, so it's a little different for some people out there, but I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I was about to ask you, how is the Minnesota weather treating you this morning? Because it's just after Christmas now. So it must be pretty chilly out there, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we have some snow on the ground. I believe it's about 20 degrees outside, so that's Fahrenheit.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. 20-degree Fahrenheit. So for the people who would like to know, and they can convert that into Celsius. Minnesota is a very cold state in the United States. So welcome to the show, Adam. And definitely 8:30 is pretty early. But of course, it's a little slower day just after Christmas. And people are, yeah, I want to go to the work. I don't want to work, or I just want to take a long weekend, and so on and so forth. And but still, it's a good thing to keep the show because then people, when they come back next week, they can, watch it at their convenient time. So, Adam, I know that you have a lot of technical background and a lot of technical expertise in terms of manufacturing activities on the electronic side of it. That too, if I can just a little bit narrow it down on the surface mount, side of it, if I'm not mistaken. But I think you have an expertise also on the counterfeit the mitigations and risk involved and the solutions and so on and so forth. But before we get onto that, just tell us and tell our audience about your background, how you got into the technical field and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. So I have I've had maybe not a straight path to getting into engineering. I the first college experience I had was getting a certificate and going into the IT field. And then I got a CCNA, and I really was involved heavily in the network IT space for a good portion of my life. And then I also went into doing some construction work, which then the low voltage went to the high voltage, and then now I'm doing construction. And then the point of it is that eventually I was quite interested in even like the renewable energy side of things, but it all kind of circle right back to the electronics that's involved in regards to making sure that you have reliable infrastructure, making sure that you have good data network and reliable electronic devices.
Wow, that's a very, very interesting path, I would say. And finally, now you are at a stage that you have a excellent solution that you guys have innovated and you guys have come up with. And of course, we'll talk about that a little later. But tell us what is exactly is counterfeit component in the electronics manufacturing?
Yeah, so a lot of the components that we tend to find if we're in contract manufacturing space, or even OEM for that matter. I mean, you have parts that are, like this big or smaller, right? And as the parts get smaller and smaller, it's really hard to understand whether or not they're authentic. And so you would have to put it under a microscope, and maybe it's a 80 times zoom or 1,000 times zoom. But whatever it is just getting smaller and smaller. At the same point in time, parts are becoming obsolete a little bit faster than maybe traditionally what we would expect.
Hmm.
Just last year alone, there were 450,000 parts that
Wow.
became obsolete. So when you're looking at that, and then you look at some of the geopolitical problems that we're having, and even with COVID, I mean, it all kind of comes to light that we have to have a more resilient supply chain. Now, there was some discussion of counterfeit mitigation in the early 2010s that went to Congress, and then they started implementing some of these standards. So you have the 6081, which is SAE. Um,
Hmm.
and so the SAE 6081, the 6171, the 5553, these are pretty common standards for authenticating components and testing components. That is encompassed in the G19 committee that you talked about earlier. And so I'm a liaison, so I get to talk about, based on my experience, and talk with some of the top experts in the world on how to test components and authenticate them. Now, it's the and I don't want to ever say anything bad about the SAE and some of those committee members or anything like that, but a lot of times what happens is it takes so long for an idea to actually get on a standard that then gets published.
Right.
Point of it is that if you're just relying on waiting for a standard to tell you what to do, by that time it's too late.
Yeah. That's right. And now, how do you identify that these are counterfeit components?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have some illustrations here. Okay. So
Okay, okay, please do.
let's say you have this part, and this is a part that we have cataloged. Now, granted, I've made it a little bit larger than what you're used to,
Okay.
right? And then let's say you have another part like this, right? These are two different parts, right?
Yeah.
How'd you
Right.
know which one is authentic, right?
Yeah.
So they pretty much look identical, right? And the point of it is that if you're buying stuff on the open market, it both of them could be bad, both of them could be good. How would you know that, right? You have to have a point of reference. And so when I was working with, or continue to work with chipsID and the founding members there, the point of it is that we wanted to have a gold sample or exemplar policy from the start. We wanted to make
Mm.
sure that the stuff that's in our database is a point of reference that people can bank on. And because of it, I mean, we've been able to collect thousands of parts, and I have a presentation later, but probably one of the biggest things that we're proud of is that 25% of our database at this point in time are obsolete components. So there's no other
Wow.
database that I know of that anybody I've talked to that has
Wow.
that many parts of traceable back to the original component manufacturer, high resolution, high magnification images for reference. And not only that, but we keep the die. And so
Mm.
if there's ever any better microscopy later, we can go back and we can look at it even finer.
So,
And go ahead.
so when you say 25% of the components are obsolete, or I mean, the counterfeit components, then how does it affect in the functionality? I mean, the life time of those components will not be like the original one anyways. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. So in our database, we make a distinction between what is called a device under test or something that is of unknown authenticity.
mhm.
And then we have something that is coming from an authorized distributor. And so DigiKey is one of our premier places that we like to purchase from, but we've also purchased from Avnet and Mauser and some of the other ones. Arrow is another one. So we're purchasing parts that are end of life, that there is very limited stock, and there are catalog in those parts. And you might think, well, that's not necessarily the most difficult thing to do, right? And some people have done that before. But the point of it is that we've brought it down to a process where it's at the ready right now. So somebody can use the database and they can start downloading reports today.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So, and if someone, how can one slip identifying, the counterfeit components and when they receive the component, right?
Yeah,
So,
yes. A lot of that has to do with receiving inspection. You can also do
okay.
electrical testing as well. But the point of it is that you want to be able to have a reference point. You want to be able to
Yeah.
have, and again, it's just like IPC, right? So if you have IPC, whether it's the 610 standard or the 620 standard, it really doesn't matter. The point of it is, and I have a catalog actually right over there. I could probably just grab that book. But the point of it is that you have a reference image that says this is what is allowable and this is what's not allowable. And they create a whole book around that. And the way that counterfeit is being handled right now, for the most part, is
Hmm.
that you have some companies out there or some services out there that tell you what all the bad examples are, but they don't have a reference for what's good.
What's good? Yeah.
So the point of it is that you're only seeing half the picture. And how can you be really confident? Because as companies or as counterfeiters, let's put it that way, right? They have their own enterprise as a company, I guess. As they're scaling up their operations to make more counterfeits, they're just going to keep getting better at it. It's going to be more reproducible, right? Once this
Right.
part, for example, is not available on the market, and now people are willing to pay 20 times more for the part.
Hmm.
Well, here, let's introduce this part. People, there's a market for it, right? And so, how do you make a difference between the two? And really what it comes down to here is it's a lot of the secret sauce, if you want to call it that, is getting down to the die, right? And
Yeah.
I could make it even easier for you, right? The die, right?
Right. Right.
And the
Right.
die is so small and the marks are just so teeny that is very difficult to replicate that. And not only are you replicating that, but you're also replicating the wear bonds too. So if
Yeah.
you
That is true.
have the machines that actually do the work, how are you going to be able to make the counterfeits even anywhere
Hmm.
close, right? So when you get down to the die, it's like they're either using a die that already exists, or they're you know they're not even putting a die in it. I mean, there's not a lot of options there.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting, and that's very alarming too, because anything can go south when when you have that receive those components and start using in your electronics manufacturing process. So let's take a quick break here and let's come back and talk about chips ID and what it does and how it is trying to come out with a solution. Let's take a quick break here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this earth. This is your host, Rajiv Kulkarni. Welcome to Global Electronics Friday Talk Show. And we are talking about electronics manufacturing. What are the challenges? How is the trend? And what's happening in the electronics manufacturing? Today, we are talking about the counterfeit components in the electronics manufacturing activities. So we have Mr. Adam Hook, who is the co-founder and revenue officer for the company chipsID. Yes, chipsid.com. If you go to their website, you can find more details there. But we are going to talk about chipsID. Welcome back, Adam, after this small break. And before the break, we spoke about what is counterfeit components and how you can identify these components and how it can slip away and what kind of little bit of precautions the receiving people can do to avoid these kind of components in their manufacturing process. Now let's talk about chipsID and what exactly is chipsID and what you guys do. I mean, you can present it if you have a presentation. So I will give you here share the screen. Yeah, you can share the screen too.
Okay,
Yeah, I can see.
I see. All right.
Yeah.
So it's really similar to a presentation I did for IIOM, which is the International Institute of Obsolescence Management. And they're trying to get ahead of having counterfeit problems just by having increased safety stock and then having some methods of authenticating. So one of the points I just want to make right off the bat here is that counterfeiting is so profitable that criminals aren't going to stop anytime soon. So what you see there is an SOIC8. And the SOIC8 is very similar to what I had 3D printed out here. This is much larger, right? But again, if you're looking at these different part numbers on the bottom here, right, they look so similar. The big, if you're just visually inspecting this, is just the marking on the top. So what prevents somebody from just putting some paint on the top and just laser marking it, right? That's the difference between a 10-cent part and a $100 part. That's 1,000 times return on investment. If you compare it to, let's say, the illicit drug trade, the drug trade is only 30x, and they're able to buy governments and facilitate funding an army. So, I mean, it's kind of important there to understand how big of a risk this is. The other part of it is that not only is it like a functional risk, right? These things just don't power on. Well, that's probably the best case situation because you could figure out that that's the bad part. But really the worst case situation is a cybersecurity risk. So if you have multiple die, right, you have a rogue die, it could be a kill switch, it could be data corruption, it could be data decryption, it could have a certain die that then runs the encryption process. It's just not even wire bonded, right? And so there's some threats to the state or to any national security.
Correct.
Right? If that's running, that the data could be compromised. So, and again, it affects safety, health, freedom. It's kind of a big deal, right? It affects nearly every aspect of life. if you have bad components on a board, I like to say that nothing else matters. You could have the cleanest board. No offense to my friend Adam Klett at Kaizen. He's a cool guy, but you got to make sure you have good parts on the board. That's probably the most essential basic thing to understand. When you're looking at obsolete components, here this is speaking to the IIOM folks out there, right? The commercial off-the-shelf electronic components average life cycle is only 4 years. And last year there was 450,000 components that were discontinued.
Mm.
Now, not all those are electronic components, mind you, but just understand the scope of this. And also understand that if you look at that 4 years and you compare it against the life cycle of the devices that you're having to support, aerospace defense systems can last 30 years. So you're talking 26 years of trying to find that part that was never been made, right? That stopped being made after year 4. The other thing is if you're looking at medical technology, it takes up to 13 years to qualify a product. And once you get that preferred status by an insurance company, at that point in time, that's when you want to make as much of that product as possible in order to recoup the cost that you've sunk into developing that product in the first place. And so this is counterfeit is and just obsolescence is an issue that literally every contract manufacturer and OEM has had that conversation once, and some people are having that conversation every week of them being operating. So
Wow.
gold samples extend product life cycle and reduce authentication costs. And the reason why you say that is that you want to catalog the gold samples early. So when parts are available and accessible, you catalog them during the development phase. And that cataloging them early helps stop counterfeiters before they get better at creating the fake products and when those products are the most profitable. So if you can stop that right at the gates, then that's a good risk management system.
Yep.
So just going to ask you a question here, if you don't mind, Rajiv. Which
Yeah.
one of these transistors is authentic?
Okay, good question. I would say one on the right to me.
Okay. The one that looks like it's from Korea. Says KOR on it.
Yeah, the one which has a KOR
Okay.
on it. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know the answer, but for the people at home, there's a QR code that then goes to a YouTube video. You can see how these parts compare side by side.
Okay, great.
Oh, here's another quiz for you, if
Yeah.
you don't mind. Which Texas Instrument SOIC8? I know you're from Texas, so I like to throw this in. Um, which of these TI SOIC8s, right? We're talking this package, right? Very common,
Uh-huh.
has the die marking UCC 3804. Is it UCC 2804 DTR or 3804 DTR?
Should be 3804.
Right, that would make the most sense, but that's not the case. So,
That's
um,
okay.
you know, it makes it difficult to authenticate these parts is the point that I'm trying to make here, right? So this is a gold
Correct.
sample where that has that, and so what they did is they upsampled that die.
Mm. Wow.
But this kind of situation right here would get the good guys, right? The people who are in GIDEP or ERAI, these reporting agencies for counterfeits. Somebody would see this and say, well, this doesn't correlate. So
Yeah.
let's report this. And that just adds a lot of confusion in the industry. And if you take this part off of an already existing assembly, after the surprise here, now it's very problematic.
Mm.
Here's some more parts. And again, these are parts that chipsID is finding like frequently,
Mm.
right? I've
Yeah.
issued GIDEP counterfeit report myself not too long ago.
So somebody has commented saying that the point is there are some original fakes manufactured in organized manner.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
Yes, so they can scale up that operation. And what you might be able to do this. So the closest thing that you could get from an authentic fake, right, or authentic looking fake is if you had a rejected part.
Hmm.
original component manufacturer. And so
Correct.
for that kind of situation, right, which is rare because it's a lot easier because counterfeiters aren't like that intelligent, right? Now I'm
Yeah.
posting this on the internet and now people are going to want to prove me wrong. But they're not that sophisticated. So it's far easier for them to buy a 10-cent part and to throw a little bit of extra effort into making it seem like it's a much more expensive part than finding a reliable and
Reliable.
continuous
Yeah.
supply of reject parts because a lot of times the OSAT companies, which are the testing, assembly testing parts or services for the original component manufacturer, a lot of times they want to protect their intellectual property. They don't want to lose that contract.
Hmm.
Going to control their waste stream very closely. And so
Wow.
the point of this slide here is just saying
Yeah. It's
behavior may introduce the counterfeits.
yeah, Taiwan pin and black topping. V is black topped counterfeit. I see. Wow. Look at that.
So imagine if you're in a business and you have a buying team, a procuring team that's trying to get you parts, and there's no other parts available on the market, and somebody says, "Hey, this part's $200, but I could get it cheaper over here." How many people in management would say, "No, don't do that"?
Right.
How many people would say, "Go ahead, we got to make this product in order to ship it, in order to sell it"? There's
Right.
gonna be far more people, I believe, in management that are going to say, "Just put it on a thing. If it doesn't work, buy another part, put it on there." And I have nothing against the original component manufacturers and the distributors, except for the fact that if you have a bad part and you buy more parts, they like that behavior. They love it. They don't, right? As long as they don't get a
Yeah.
name and you buy more of their stuff, why would they care?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Excellent.
But
Excellent.
when people are reporting these counterfeits here, you got to understand at the same point in time, it's volunteered and it's suspected counterfeit parts. And so why is this important to make that distinction is that you rarely find the component you're looking for. And that's because other companies may not use the parts that you use. So their database and the stuff that they've reported, it may not correspond to what you're trying to accomplish. At the same point in time, they might not have the advanced microscopes and the imaging systems that you have. So you may get incomplete information. You may get bad assumptions because a lot of customers don't, or a lot of OEMs, even OCMs, um, or just CMs in general, they don't capture a good die ahead of time. And so
Hmm.
S Corporation and those guys, they seem to be really on top of things. Um, Point of it is that they've told chipsID that 98% of their customers, so 2% of their customers are the ones that are capturing known good devices ahead of time. So that means that when you have a counterfeit report, there's a good chance, there's much greater odds that it is a bad assumption or incomplete information, just based on that alone. And counterfeits are getting harder to identify, so you have less confidence when you're authenticating with device under test. That's a suspected counterfeit, it's a device under test. But thankfully, and this is part of the G19 committee that I'm a part of,
Yeah.
there's a new standard that's coming through that's going to go to ballot sometime early next year. And it's going to have a new importance on exemplars, which are authentic components traceable to the original component manufacturer. And as far as chipsID is concerned, it's a gold sample. I think that's an easier, more relatable term than exemplar.
Very nice.
And the way that they have it written in the document at this point in time, of course, it goes to ballot and people can make changes. But at this point in time, it is written as exemplar is commonly used as a reference to compare against a device under test. There's also another revision change that's happening. This is for the /4A, and that's
Hmm.
requiring lid decapsulation, physical analysis. So it's also this die inspection, right? So on all moderate, high critical risk aerospace defense applications, you must have a die inspection. And so you're comparing a known good device die against a suspected counterfeit part. That's how you're able to authenticate suppliers. That's how you're able to verify product that comes through. And the way, again, it's written in the document at this point is an OCM die logo. Names should be easy to discern when comparing to an exemplar. So
Yeah,
I'm just gonna let you know here. When it comes to the chipsID side of it, we have a database for OEMs, and they can look at the database and search this right here. As I was mentioning earlier, we have 25% of our database is obsolete.
absolute. Yeah.
ICs or microchips. And if you take the remaining 75%, they have an average 11 and a half week lead time. So what happens when your primary supplier of a component doesn't have it? They're totally out of stock, and they're going to say they're going to be available in 11 and a half weeks. Do you wait around, or do you try to find another way to get that part?
Right.
Right? Rajiv, I don't think you'd be waiting around for 11 and a half weeks.
No, 11.5 weeks is way, way, way too long. I mean, technology changes by then.
Yeah, by that time you lost your customer for life. Why would you wait
Right.
that, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, especially
Exactly.
Christmas time too here, right?
Yeah,
Trying to buy
absolutely.
your smart birdhouse for your wife, and and they say, "Oh yeah, well you'll have that in 11 and a half weeks." You're gonna say, "No, I'm gonna buy something else. I'd buy her a watch
Yeah,
or something, you know."
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
So and again, just the point of this right here is that for OEMs, this lets you ensure reliability, and it lets you ensure future customers, because you want to have those future customers if you upset them with such long lead times.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So how chips ID plays a vital role in terms of finding solution on the counterfeit components?
Yeah, so we have three different channels or three different products that we offer, right? And
Yeah,
so we have a database that is a subscription model. We have the GS store, which is a gold sample store, and that's where you can download these PDFs that then have the images there. So sometimes people they don't want to pay thousands of dollars for a subscription. ERAI, I believe it's $10,000 for a subscription per seat. And then, there's other subscription models that you can get as well. But the point of it is that sometimes people don't really come across this issue as frequently in order to justify that kind of expense. So what they'll do is they'll say, all right, well, how about we do like an a la carte thing? How about we just buy the reports as we need them? And so
yeah,
this is for the contract manufacturers that have a potential line stoppage. And when you have a line down, I like to think it's $1,000 a minute cost, but I've heard it's higher than that too.
yeah. I guess so. That's what I was about to say. That even if you subscribe, I mean, it's not a big investment when you compare the losses that you might incur, due to this.
For
I mean,
sure.
$1,000 per minute is definitely a very modest number, I would say,
Hmm.
but definitely it is much, much higher than that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if you have an area of interest on a circuit board where
Yeah.
you're thinking, well, we procured some parts that were outside of our normal or preferred suppliers, and we think that they might be causing some problems, it's a lot easier to just go out and buy some of these reports. Again, they're not that expensive, and then you can have something that you can verify against. And then that lets you diagnose those boards and to say, all right, well, I'm not going to focus my area of interest on this part or this part. I'm going to put more of my interest on maybe some of this other kind of
Yeah.
situations.
Yes. Very interesting.
So here's another question for you, Rajiv. You seem to like these questions. All right, so you get a guide up, suspect counterfeit part alert on something that you're building for your company right now, right?
Yeah.
What steps do you take? What's the next thing?
First thing I will contact is Chips ID.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds nice. That plays really well into what I'm talking about, but I mean, you know, I'll tell you what you're not going to do, okay? If you don't mind. What you're not going to do
Please.
is keep building the product.
Yes, I'll put a
That
stop on the
you, you
process.
gotta
Yeah.
you gotta stop and you gotta somehow um quarantine,
Yeah,
right?
my immediate action plan would be stop the production and put the product which have been diagnosed with these kind of you know counterfeit part alert under the quarantine zone,
Hmm.
and also put a hold on the supply of that particular supplier,
Hmm.
and because we don't want more coming in till we find the root cause of these particular parts, why it got into this stage, right? So I
Sure.
think these are my immediate steps.
Yeah, and if you're doing aerospace and defense, it's really important to understand that if you have a part that's found in an aerospace defense system that's counterfeit, I mean, you could have some major fines. And if it results in any sort of wrongful death or injury, I mean, you could be done. You could be
Yeah,
done with the
it's
company.
it's a it's a done. I mean, the company will just close down.
And
Yeah,
the guide up, when you have a guide up report and it's going against you as a supplier,
yeah,
right? That's a
uh,
permanent record that people can see repeatedly. They could say, this company delivered this product that was bad. They didn't do their due diligence. And
mm,
there's from what I understand, I've not verified this. I've heard this a few times, but there's offices that are in Washington, D.C. of defense prime contractors where they're just combing records, public records, legal records to try to find some reason to try to manipulate or coerce to get more business, to say, oh, well, this competitor over here, these guys do so bad. They don't take care of their quality. They don't do their checks, but we do. So you should give the contract to us. That
us.
billion-dollar contract, right?
Yeah,
And whether you think that's ethical or not, point of it is it's good to have good quality. So I mean, I'm not going to shame them too hard. I just don't like that method.
right, right. Totally understand.
So
Yes,
what steps do you take on this? Again, very similar. Um, is you gotta pay attention to you have stock
yes,
components, right? You
yes,
might have
yeah.
a stocking distributor. You might have a certain distribution method that you get. You got to make sure that those people are aware of the problem. You got to stop your work in progress and start inspecting. And then you have to notify people that you may have shipped product. You may have to do a recall. It's just the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that I will put a hold on the shipment. I'll see the work in progress, what's happening, put a hold there, right?
mhm.
Quarantine the areas, and also, of course, the stock components. How much of them are affected with the suspect counterfeit parts, right? So yeah,
Oh yeah, I mean you certainly have the right idea. But
yeah,
again, you just quarantining it is one thing, but you gotta have, what I feel like if you have any other issue with electronics manufacturing, usually you're taking out an IPC book. That's just kind of standard, right? And again, those IPC books, they have a good example, they have a bad example. You don't just use one, you use
yeah,
both of them, right? You have to
yeah,
characterize the counterfeit and also characterize what is a good quality part.
correct.
So you're going to utilize GuideUp, and GuideUp, as some people might be familiar with. GuideUp is the government information data exchange program. This is what the U.S. uses, and so it's not really available outside of the country of the United States. But ERAI is, and then there's also the anti-counterfeiting forum that the UK has.
Hmm.
You want to, detail examples of suspect counterfeit and non-conforming components. You're going to use those tools, and then you're going to use chipsID to document
Yes,
what is known
yes,
good, and gold samples are the better method. If you had to choose one for
yeah,
long-term component detection, and the reason is that these counterfeit reports might go back to the people who are making the counterfeits in the first place, and they're going to say, oh, well, people are noticing this part of this not seeming real. Oh, I'm just gonna change that.
yeah.
So going to change that part of it so I can keep selling what I'm trying to sell.
Mhm.
And so there's a peer-reviewed case study, and I was involved on this case study, and I evaluated it, peer-reviewed again. I had different methods that I was looking at, and again, nothing came out perfect, but chipsID was easily the better option.
Wow.
Um, and that was where I started going down the path of being co-founder of the company because I did the study, and it just made a lot of sense. But
Excellent.
yeah, that paper included a 3-factorial 5-replicant case study of components of unknown authenticity, and chipsID was the only effective solution. And so part of the study, and I do recommend people reading this. It's a 19-page paper. It's relatively long read. But the point of it that I think is really important to understand is that I figured, like, I reached out to 3 different companies that capture what is known good examples of their product, right? Of circuit boards, of components, right? They've been written about in Time Magazine as some of the
Mhm.
best inventions for counterfeit mitigation. And so I got these packets that I made up that had different parts from different suppliers. And I said, all right, you're capturing gold samples. You're capturing what is known good. Here's a bag. I'm going to ship it to you. You tell me what's good. You tell me what's authentic with the records that you've been keeping, because over the last year, you've been collecting this data. You should know. And at the time, I didn't have any bias towards any company. It was just like whichever one emerged as the winner or as the better solution is going to be the one that I'm going to use through Harvard Bioscience. And I did. And so Harvard Bioscience is a customer of chipsID. So and that's kind of how that went down that path. But yeah,
Excellent.
it's pretty interesting though,
Yes,
because
it is. Yeah. Very nice.
so
Very good insight about chips ID, as well as how you can mitigate these counterfeit components there. And yeah, dice don't lie. That is absolutely true.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, certainly.
So dice don't lie, which is a true statement. And that's an excellent presentation, Adam. I should say thank you very much for that. And I think, yeah, we are almost through the time. And last few minutes, you want to send any message to our great audience?
Yeah, I can provide the link to my paper.
Mhm.
Um, it's gonna get to the chat window here. Um, I'm not sure if a lot of people have access to IEEE membership, but
There can be, we can always put that in the YouTube your link. I can always put that. That and probably people can then access, and that's another opportunity for them to researchgate.net. Okay.
yep. So you can download this. You don't have to log in. It doesn't have a paywall to it.
Yeah,
And you're
so
going
I'll
to find
just
two different documents. One is going to be the paper that was published, and then you're going to find a strategy guide for counterfeit mitigation. So that is the MedTech version of it. So I make reference to FDA, so 21 CFR 20,
okay.
and then ISO 1345, and the latest version of that, I believe, is 2017. But the point again is that there has not been a document that has covered medical technology counterfeit. Usually what happens is you have aerospace standards, they lead the way, and then people make reference to whatever aerospace is doing is what we want to do.
Right,
I
right,
don't
right.
feel like that's the best way to go about it, because there's certain methods that work really well for aerospace because they're sending stuff to outer space, right? We have to have radiation
Right,
hardening. We have to have, strong fluctuations in temperature. Whereas
yeah.
if you're talking about medical technology, where is that being used? That's being used implant in your body. That has nothing to do. Like if you have the
Yeah,
radiation in space,
Yeah.
like on your body, you're not going to survive. It's not equivalent, I don't feel. There's
Yeah.
definitely things that are of value, but that's
Yeah.
why I felt like the strategy guide was very important, and it's a free download.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. And I thank all the audience, whoever could get an opportunity to watch today's live show. But anyway, this show will be there on the YouTube link that we have shared with you already. You can watch it to your convenient time. And we are almost coming to the end of the show. Adam Hook, thank you so very much for joining us today on this global electronics platform. And this particular talk show is meant only to share the knowledge in the electronics manufacturing. That's what the small attempt I'm trying to do to the electronics community, so people can definitely avail this benefit of learning on a day-to-day basis that we come across. So next week, we are going to have another gentleman with us who will be talking about how important it is FMEA in the electronics manufacturing. FMEA is a very, very, very important factor when we talk about smart factory solution, when we talk about the continuous production lines, and so on and so forth. So it would be a very interesting topic, just the way we had today about chipsID. And we wish chipsID all the best. And definitely the chipsID logo will be displayed on our global electronics every show, so that people can get more and more aware of this company and try to use your services more and more to fight against these counterfeit components that we are facing on a day-to-day basis, and it's increasing. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again, and thank you, Sandeep, for helping out on this technical setup. And thank you again, Adam, and have a wonderful weekend. And we will see you next week at the same time on the same channel with your host, Rajiv Kulkarni. Thank you again. Take care.